next, we have a very, very cool, very necessary, very interesting panel titled Legacy to Legal. What's next? Our moderator today is the fantastic Mary Bailey. Mary Bailey is the managing director of the Last Prisoner Project. If you don't know about the Last Prisoner Project, I really, really urge you to research it. What they're doing to help cannabis prisoners, people in prison for cannabis, more than 40,000 people in America in prison for cannabis. It's just amazing. So, Mary, the stage is yours.
Well, Javier, thank you so much for having me today. I am so excited for this panel. I've got a couple legends of the industry. Come on up, everybody. So Last Prisoner Project, we're a criminal justice reform nonprofit dedicated to releasing cannabis prisoners. We feel that anybody who is in the legal cannabis industry should feel a moral imperative to help those who have been negatively impacted by the criminalization of cannabis. So today I'm joined by some industry legends. We're going to start with Stephanie Shepard. In 2010, Stephanie received a 10-year federal prison sentence as a first-time nonviolent offender. She now works with Last Prisoner Project on the development team, advocating for the release of other prisoners who've been negatively impacted by the prohibition of cannabis, and she helps to raise funds to support grants for returning citizens and their family members. Next, we've got Marie Montmarquet. She's the founder of MD Numbers Incorporated, which is a family of vertically integrated cannabis brands. She's a legacy cannabis operator who's been passionate about the plant for over 15 years. In addition to developing and scaling successful cannabis businesses, Marie is focused on as an advocate for social justice and equity within the industry. Next, we've got Willie Mack. Willie has had more than 20 years of global executive management experience and 7 years in the cannabis industry. He's currently serving as the CEO of Frank White brand with the son of the notorious B.I.G., C.J. Wallace. Rick DeLisi serves as the CMO of DeLisioso Cannabis Company. He's been an international cannabis advocate and legacy operator for over 20 years in Amsterdam. He was 11 years old when his father, Richard, received a 98-year cannabis sentence. Next up, we've got Richard DeLisi. Richard served 32 years in prison of a 99-year sentence for smuggling cannabis in the 80s. Now, Richard has a legal cannabis brand named DeLisioso, which I will say launched yesterday in Florida with Trulieve and sold out in less than 2 hours. Absolutely. So first of all, congratulations, Richard, on your newly launched legal brand. Awesome.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, when you received that 98-year sentence, what was it like? And were you expecting a sentence like that? And what got you through those 32 years of incarceration?
Well, to question one, I thought the sentence was crazy because the courts called for 12 to 17, and the judge recommended 12, and they said 98 years, and I thought the judge was joking. So I looked over at my attorney and I said, hey, Sky, what's going on here? He said, oh, don't worry about nothing. We'll have you back in a couple of weeks. We'll get this straightened out. Well, 32 years later, they still haven't straightened it out. But here I am today.
That's right. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. I was at the prison outside with your family the day that you walked out of those gates. And there is absolutely no feeling like it. I am so honored to be an advocate for you and to work on your release campaign. And then Rick, let's hear from you. I would like you to share a little bit about, through the work that I do with Last Prisoner Project, I've been learning about the collateral consequences of cannabis convictions, and it creates a ripple of trauma throughout an entire family. And when one person goes to prison, the entire family goes to prison in one way or another. So could you share with us a little bit what your life was like before your dad went to prison, and if his charge and his sentence had anything to do with you moving to Europe at a young age?
Yes. So before my father went to prison, I was in my adolescent stage of my life, and I was witnessing a lot of my family trying to get along, everybody going to work, everything being very busy. You know, I was trying to, find my own way as being a kid. And when my father went to prison, what I noticed the most was his family kind of decimate and go into ruins. So I had a little brother and a sister, and my grandmother took care of them. And she was very old, so it was very complicating. I saw my whole father's side of the family crumble. And yeah, it's a hard thing to witness when you're young. And I can't really explain how it affects the family as much as just try to tell you that it's traumatic for everybody, because everybody's wondering what's happening, when something's going to break, the appeal, then the motions, everything gets denied. And after a while, everybody starts to lose some sort of faith in the correctional system. So that was very heavy for me growing up, and to witness that. For your second part of the question, my mother took a look at the situation and basically let me know that, like, she didn't want me in the States anymore, because she saw me following a little bit in my father's footsteps, and she tried to take that possibility out of my life. So she gave me the opportunity to go to Amsterdam. I went to visit my aunt, and I met my wife after 3 weeks, and that was 1994. And yeah, so it did heavily affect my whole family structure and kind of broke and fragmented everything. I watched almost every family member he had pass away while he was in. So, yes.
It's definitely it's an experience that the whole family is a part of. Now, my next question is for Stephanie. Stephanie, we know that there are huge challenges when people are returning to society from being incarcerated, and it's a mountain of challenges, really. I was hoping that you can share a little bit of your experience rebuilding your life post-incarceration.
Thank you. For me, rebuilding, when I got home, it felt difficult, because prior to prison, it was my first time offense. It was a conspiracy charge. And trying to come from that, then doing 9 years in prison and coming out in 2019, I was wondering, what am I going to do? I can't go back to real estate, which is what I did before, because I had a felony. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know where I was headed. I was some age when I got home, and I was just like, what am I going to do? And I went to a fundraiser for the Last Prisoner Project. And I met Mary Bailey, and I began to work with the Last Prisoner Project and utilize their platform. And it clicked one day. This is what I'm supposed to do. I know what it feels like to sit in prison when there is a booming industry outside. So there's no way I could move on with my life in any other direction, because I know what they feel like inside right now while this is happening. So I'm very blessed now to work with Mary and the Last Prisoner Project, raise these funds that people need when they get home, when they re-enter society. I was myself a constituent first, so the grants that we give, I was lucky enough to be a recipient of that, which gave me a little more self-confidence after not touching a dollar for 9 years. This is something I'm now in control of. And it helped me move forward. And I'm happy to say I am able to be here today with you, but not just at Benzinga, but in the free world, period. So thank you.
Well, it's definitely important to note, too, that all legacy operators, they are the pioneers of this booming industry. And if it weren't for their bravery coming before us, we wouldn't be in the place we are now. So it's really very important to include them moving forward and lower the barriers to entry into the legal industry. My next question is for Marie. Marie, can you share some lessons that you've learned from your role in the legacy market that have helped you build a competitive edge and find success in the legal market?
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. I think just makes me feel even more blessed to come from the legacy market and have pioneers sitting here. And I have not faced anything near, what Stephanie and Lancy family has, but just being able to come from the legacy market is really important, right? Because we were the original research and development. We were the original brand pioneers. We still are everything that there is to know about product specialization or logistics even, right? We're talking about how you brought a product in across borders for centuries even or decades. The market has been so established, especially in California. We have a regulated market since '96. So there's a lot of respect that comes from all the business intelligence that we've been able to see over the years, whether that's data visualization that we've had for decades, whether it's point of sale systems that we understand. It's not necessarily just that, but genetics of the plant. A lot of people come into this aspect of recreational cannabis and they forget that everything that we do is medicinal. And there's a true reason why all of your consumers want to participate in cannabis. It's not just because they want to get lifted. It's because they're solving a particular problem in their life. And if you understand that problem, you can dig into that specific product, the void in the marketplace, what your competition doesn't understand. I mean, we've understood that first and for the longest. And there's a lot of business intelligence that we truly have, even from a genetic perspective, right? Like hearing at this conference, a lot of the bigger brands are talking about genetics. Yes, it's always been genetics and it'll always be genetics. And those of us that have been in this industry the longest understand which genetics have the best approach for everything down to even a specific geography or where you're growing, from the ailment to the soil to the product type. And you have to really be able to expect us to have that knowledge and respect us for having that knowledge and bring us into the industry instead of putting up a lot of barriers to keep us competition, because you don't want the people that have all the knowledge to be your competition. Tax-free at that. That's crazy.
Excellent point. Willie, I'm really excited to learn more, but can you talk about the legacy of the Frank White brand and how you're working with CJ Wallace to honor his late father in the Notorious B.I.G.?
Yeah, Mary, good to see you, and thanks. Pleasure being here and honored to be on this panel today. When I met CJ and we started thinking about his responsibility to his dad, Christopher Wallace's legacy, one of the first things he said was, I'm responsible for the legacy of Christopher Wallace, not the Notorious B.I.G., because Christopher Wallace was the man, the young black man at 24 who we were taking too far, too soon from his life. Notorious B.I.G. was a persona that he created, and that was a fiction, but he wove a narrative around his world that became so real in many ways to his detriment that to this day still lives as who people see and who he thinks he is. So Frank White has been a way for CJ to say, how do I build my own legacy in my own lane and celebrate cannabis's impact on creativity, cannabis's impact on black culture? How do we talk about generational wealth and ownership within the black community as we think about legacy? But how do I also use it as a way to talk about to understand and learn who my father was, what his hopes and dreams were as a young black man at 21, 22, who was writing rhymes and becoming a narrator for his community, and how can I pick up that legacy and do honor to him while at the same time build a legacy for my family? And what does that mean for my community, my family, the legacy operators? He's like, if Christopher Wallace Sr. was alive today, he would be in cannabis, as we all know. He was a notorious cannabis user, and it really helped him connect to his creativity. It allowed him to really express himself sometimes, as we all have seen, as you said. Yeah, cannabis is not recreational, is just medical conditions we haven't defined or really defined yet. And it's been really important for us to think about as we look at, we're going to start applying for licenses in New York. We've been lobbying in New York, helping push through social equity sort of law provisions aren't still where they need to be. How do we talk about what this means to bridge the gap between where the legacy market was and where the legal market is, and utilize the connections and the resources and kind of talk to the communities that were most harmed by prohibition, especially when we think about New York State and nationwide, to kind of tell this bigger message? And how do we also pass that down to next generations? It's great to meet you guys to see how families have been affected so many negative ways, but yet we can sort of spin that around and try to build legacy that you can leave for your kids, we can bring for our nieces and nephews, and remove and deal with some of the trauma that we had to deal with. I've had family members that were in jail for cannabis, and I was in the legacy market back in college for a little while, and there's so much the stigma around oh, they went to jail, oh, your cousin got popped, your uncle got popped, like, you don't really talk about them, you kind of get forgotten, but yet they're sitting here, and as you say, watching this industry grow and being like, well, hold on, why am I sitting here dealing with something that now everyone's making money off of? There's an inequity here that we cannot allow to be unaddressed.
Thank you. So one thing that I've seen, so I've been in the industry for 20 years, and as it's become more and more legal lately, what I've been seeing is these huge companies investing millions and losing millions because they're money people, but they're not cannabis people. So they don't really have the insight they need to have a successful company. So I'd love to hear from some of the legacy operators on the panel. Can you give us some insight into some of the challenges that face legal operators that legacy operators are well equipped to manage because of their experience?
Well, when I look at the industry, I notice a lot of the times that when corporate gets approached to the legacy market, it seems like it's not truly valued, and the number crunching goes on too quick before the research is really, worth making a whole structure around. So what ends up happening is somebody comes in and they're just like, okay, we're gonna build a 100 lighter here, 100 lighter there, 100 lighter there. We'll have 1,000 lights. We'll have this type of production, but there's not a real research going on behind maybe like the genetics, like she was saying, that would really target the market. And then there's certain groups that push. And that's another corporate thing with all the genetics get pushed in that line, and then that line comes out, and then they're stuck with, even if the whole grow went well, which is very rare, they're stuck with genetics they can't get rid of, or something like this, or this type of situation, or they don't properly analyze things, have proper quality control. There's so many different little snags that are rushed and the gun is jumped on when it comes to approaching the cannabis industry. It's not the first year number crunch. It's more like a research and development for that operation at the specific time. So for me, I witnessed that a lot being part of the cannabis industry. And it shocks me, but I mean, it is sort of normal to think about because it's just been legalized. So all these people see an opportunity, they rush towards it and rush to try and make it happen. And before you know it, they're in a situation they can't control. So.
Right, beautiful points. I think the one thing people forget that Legacy was a master at is running a profitable business, a lean, mean, money-making machine. I mean, yes, we were in a different regulatory framework, but the bones and the structures of understanding the value of customers, having those customers, understanding how to make money, maybe a little bit more than raising international capital, which was my background, like hustling, making sure that every business was profitable, every business can stand alone without a vertical. Of course I can sell my own weed, but does anyone else want my flower? That's the long-term approach. Like, it's so interesting to come and see companies burn through millions and millions of dollars. And you see the people that have all these beautiful genetics, all these craft growers that really could use $1 million, but they're never gonna see it. They'll probably be out of business before they raise institutional capital because they've never done that before. They've always just sat with their plants and made money with their plants. And now the evolution of the industry is happening so fast that being lean, unless you have an Amazon approach, which a lot of these large MSOs do, you cannot just lose tens of millions of dollars to compete in an industry that's a race to the bottom. Genetics, understanding your customer, like we were saying time and time again, understanding the voids in the marketplace, understanding what's going to be like Kylie makeup, what's going to have that markup, what's going to be the most competitive product in the. These are the things that Legacy has been doing for time and time again, but not only doing profitably. So like, even from an aspect of things that we've learned, I would say the number one thing we've learned is how to be profitable. The number two thing we might have learned is that it's really hard to raise money and get into this industry, and there are a lot of hurdles that we have to overcome that we don't necessarily understand the ins and outs of. Regulatory framework for real estate or any of the other things to get through planning, but we know how to make money. And if we could partner with the right people or get funding by the right people, my company in general, we were funded completely on debt. You know, we were funded by supporters. We made a lot of people a lot of money, and we've grown a lot of flour. That's the only reason why we were able to exist. If I had to rely on institutional investment back in 2016, there was no way. I mean, it just wasn't even a realistic thing. People would tell me they don't know what Trump is going to do, and they don't want to give me money, or like any excuse known to man, right? So you really have to value what we've learned in that full centuries of research and development.
Stephanie, I'm hoping that you can speak on the importance of legal industry leaders stepping up to support the efforts of organizations who offer reentry support for returning citizens.
Besides it being just a no-brainer to do because this industry is built off the backs of Richard DeLisi and myself, it looks good. It's a good thing to do. And when you do well, you want people to know you're doing something about it. You're doing your part. In development, I work with partners and I work with companies and corporations and dispensaries and people who go to dispensaries, because people think it's legal, right? Like no one's in jail for it. Like people are genuinely shocked when I tell them it's not only happening, it happened to me. So when you can connect with someone in that way, and people can now say they've met someone who has done significant time behind cannabis that I'm just purchasing, they want to donate. And through these donations and these partnerships, I'm happy to say that we were able to give out over 650,000 last year, and directly to those impacted and their families. Not only that, but this year already, we have reached 400,000. Our goal to give out was 1 million. That is great, but funding goes quickly when so many people are in need. So when you are working with someone, building your brand, think about that giving back and those partnerships. Because Richard was in prison, maybe someone else wasn't. And he deserves that space. He deserves everything coming to him for it.
And speaking on that too, of Richard and Rick, how does it feel to launch your legal cannabis brand with one of the biggest, legal companies in Florida, TruLeaf?
It really feels amazing. It feels like it's a time of coming around, It's nice to see a big corporation like that, give back and see why to give back, and also further a venture to where there could be a situation where my dad could feel like his whole life was not a sacrifice for nothing. And because I couldn't imagine like sitting in prison the past 10 years while watching the whole booming legal industry happen. And what we're really here for is we're here for a plant that is given to us by the universe, by the earth, by God. And it has a flower that can give a lot back to us. So it's great to see, people seeing the commodity that it is now and using something like a situation that my father's been through to give back not only to my father, but TruLeaf can make money, and also it can be taxed. So it gives back to Florida, and it's a great feeling. It really is. It's an amazing feeling. Yesterday we launched and we sold out the product in 2 hours. So it was just an amazing, amazing feeling.
So I'm really excited to talk with you guys. Let's talk about consumers and their connections to legacy brands and the operators that they've grown to know and trust. How do we partner with them to aid in their desire to enter the legal market?
It's interesting. One of the things you mentioned in the last sort of couple of questions was what does the legacy market learn and can teach the legal market? And the legacy market, we all had our guy. We all had someone or brands or strains that we liked. The connection to consumers connection to brand, the connection to culture is such one of the most important things. I think so many of we see is all the money is going to brands and companies that are not necessarily hitting consumers that are still in the legacy market because they're not speaking them in a language or a culture that actually fits them and understands what does it mean to be BIPOC, queer in this community in the cannabis space, and what brands and what are the struggles of your life? What are you coming to the products for? You know, there was this one of those memes like, you know, Today's Show, all of the Upper East Side moms are now, mommy's little secret is cannabis and wine. It's like, well, that was daddy's little secret, but now daddy's been in jail for 30 years, 40 years. But we don't look at it from that point of view because now we're targeting the consumers that seem like they're, you know, more approachable and accessible, but yet we're losing connection to the culture, the consumers that are there. I think we have to look at that and say, how do we find authenticity? How do we bring truth and honesty to the industry and maintain it? Because consumers pay with their dollars. We see it through every other industry. It's shameful in many ways that one of the biggest advocates for cannabis legalization, social justice, is an ice cream company called Ben & Jerry's, and they're spending billions and millions of dollars advertising and talking about issues that a lot of the MSOs, a lot of the cannabis industry is not talking about. So we see that there is this desire to do that. How do we pick that up?
So, you know, the panel's titled Legacy to Legal, What's Next? Let's take a last couple minutes and really talk about what is next. How can we make this better? How can we even the playing ground? How do we bring in legacy to legal and give everyone a chance to really have a seat at the table?
I think one thing that we've all seen taking place a lot lately is the necessity for these large MSOs to connect with the culture, whether it's genetically, whether you see a lot of, you know, I can name states throughout the South that'll be coming online soon, and a lot of people are very concerned about how they're going to have longevity if they don't have that California connection or a connection with a certain brand in California that's very notable. How will they survive, right? So there's a huge opportunity for getting involved with those that are closest to the plant, know the plant the longest, and have that experience. I think we've seen a lot of regulatory framework be really a facade of helping legacy or a facade of helping equity. Even in New York right now, just something I think is very ill-advised is requiring 3 years of business acumen is one thing. Making me prove I paid taxes for 3 years while I operated an illicit market, that sounds like money laundering.
Right.
Like that sounds like me sitting in a court giving up far too more information than California ever made me. And California did not require any of that for us to continue to operate. And they never asked where the money came from. So making sure that, you know, for me, I can only speak from my personal experience, and I would not have been able to prove that I was paying taxes on my illicit cannabis funds for 3 years prior to evolving from Prop 215 in California to Prop 64. Like, I would not have felt comfortable doing that. That sounds insane. So we want to make sure that the barriers are low. We want to make common sense legislation, if that exists in this country, but making sure that the people that were in the industry have a true pathway to exist in the industry. It only benefits all of us. And the more that MSOs can get diversity from the top down, it's going to really make a big difference in longevity for your entire company, because you're going to understand who's smoking, you're going to understand your consumer, you're going to have those higher price points, and you're going to have a true business that can be sustainable.
Yeah, and just to add to that a little bit, I really feel where she's coming from, and I think the key is quality control and consistency. And I don't think you can really achieve that by hiring the lowest paid person and trying to juice them for their work. I think it's a real important part of legacy legal success to find the right people to manage the right situations and pay the people the right amount of salary to do the job, because it's a quality control job. That's the key to me.
What I think is next is going to be a fight, and it's going to continue to fight. And I think the legacy market is going to get more power as we turn on new markets that have these walls and barriers of entry, social equity acting like government handouts. We're not asking for government handouts. We're asking for an even playing field and support to make sure that we can come in and do what's right. I think we're going to see, as we look at more states going online, to look at more states. California's a mess. with the legacy market in terms of what the state has done for social equity. It's a mess. How do we not make that mistake in other markets? How do we also make sure that the public-private partnership is actually there? How are the CEOs and the founders of these new starting legacy brands? Where's the outreach? Where's the buildup? Why are there not legacy people on your boards and your advisory teams? How do we really, from the top down, bring the knowledge there? If you were researching any other business and said, I wanted to go and start a pharma business, or you would go to growers and farmers. If you wanted to start a flower business, I want to go to the botanists and talk to them because they have all the knowledge. But somehow this industry is like, no, we don't need to talk to those guys. We come in, turn into CPG, make a bunch of money. Doesn't matter what they already know. Google it. So this idea that somehow the industry is going to be successful and ultimately provide what we've always wanted, which is great products for our consumers and customers, are going to be able to do that without the legacy market is impossible in the long term and only going to be a failure for everyone across the board.
And yes, one more thing I want to add. This is a kind of reflection of both sides. So if I go to all the successful legacy to legal brands that I know in California, and I know quite a few successful ones, and I know, and I've watched the demise of many. What I just mentioned, I went through the whole facility and every single worker was smiling, greeting me, listening to music, vibing out, doing the things that we always did to make the plant what it was, to make people want to consume it. So I cannot stress how much that the quality control with paying people the correct amount of money to do the job they do can entail for winning in the end. So that's all I wanted to put forth. I really agree with everything y'all said. I'm so happy to be part of this panel, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
I agree. Intention is everything. You've got good intentions, it's going to do well. So again, thank you guys for taking the time to share with all of us. Thank you for being here today. It's really important to note, people who have been in prison for cannabis, they're victims of unjust laws. So as legislation is created, it's important to focus on retroactive relief, letting people out of prison who are currently in. That's something that has not been happening. It's something that it's up for all of us to put our foot down and make sure that the legislators and the powers that be let these people out. There's over 40,000 people currently incarcerated for plant medicine that was deemed an essential business during a global crisis. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you all for doing what you do. Let's just keep it going.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Mary.
Mary.
Thank you.